Hi, and welcome to our show, The Islamic Dilemma. I am your host, Fadi, and today we are going to be talking about the collection of the Quran as a book. All of my life as a Muslim, I always believed that the Quran in our hand today was the very same Quran and the original Quran that was basically revealed to the Prophet of Islam and was given to us also by the Prophet of Islam. However, there is always stories about its collection that at sometimes didn't make any sense. It has some tension and contradictions in it, and also it has some puzzling questions about it. For instance, we know that one of the people who collected the Quran actually ended up burning all of the other existing copies. With me today to continue our discussion on this very interesting topic, my special guest, Bill Warner. Bill, it's good to have you again.
As always, as always.
Bill, tell me about your understanding about how the Quran came about as a book when you were doing your research.
Well, the first thing was I was heartened to find out that there was some story or process behind it, because when I first started studying the Quran, what I believed was that when Muhammad died, he left behind the Quran. I mean, that was what I thought. But then as you start digging into it, you discover when Muhammad died, there really was no such thing as a Quran that you could pick up and put in your hand.
As a matter of fact, I like to add to what you were saying, that when Muhammad died, there has been a discovery of fragments of the Quran that were written on pieces of bones, leather, papyrus, but the majority of it was actually saved in memory. In fact, historically, we do not have any evidence that the Quran was actually written in the Meccan era. In fact, there was only one scribe that we know of, his name is Abdullah ibn Abi Sarh. He has a problem with Muhammad. A couple of times Muhammad will read a verse to him, and he will finish the verse, and Muhammad will say, oh yeah, it was revealed this way. So he tested Muhammad a second time and did the same thing. Muhammad said something, he changed the wording, and Muhammad says, yeah, and it was revealed this way. So he felt that Muhammad is just not a serious prophet. If he himself can tell Muhammad what the Quran should be written, how should be written, and what words should be used, he claimed to be a prophet just like Muhammad. In fact, Muhammad threatened his life later when he basically invaded Mecca, and Uthman basically intervened on his behalf. But this is kind of an interesting that if we do not have a written record of the Quran in Mecca, and I want to tell people that Muhammad invested about 13 years of his life in Mecca, we have the majority of the Quran size-wise revealed in Mecca to the tune of about 74% of the Quran itself. So if you have that much retained in memory, human memory, might I add, and then the rest of it was about 25 to 26%, that was at least, we know that was written, possibly all of it, maybe some of it, in Medina when Muhammad immigrated. What does that tell you about the Quran then?
Well, one of the things it told me was, this is difficult to believe that everybody remembered it so perfectly, but then a lot of the apologists for the Quran go, oh, the memory of these Arabs was beyond belief. They could retain all of this in a flawless manner. And I'm thinking, particularly when I was reading this, I'd been teaching in a university and I had many Arab students. And the Arab students that I had were not displaying any of this magnificent memory that the Arab is supposed to have. So immediately you're like, I don't know here. You got this many people remembering things, there's going to be variations.
Well, Bill, if we are to take this argument at face value and say that preserving the Quran in memory was such a big deal because the Arabs at the time of Muhammad had this wonderful memory that can retain things, how about if we look at the very person who revealed the Quran,
Muhammad,
the founder of Islam, Muhammad, the prophet, who supposedly should be the role model for everybody else. Let's take a look at one of the verses in the Quran which we will be showing on the screen right now. It's found in chapter 2, verse 106. This is what the verse reads. Whatever communications, and the communication here is talking about verses, revelations of the Quran. So we can say whatever revelations of the Quran we abrogate or we cancel or cause it to be forgotten, we bring one better than it or like it. Do you know the story behind this verse, Bill?
As I recall, Muhammad was reciting Quran, and there he omitted a verse, and one of his own, shall we say, students, I think, prompted him about something. Do I remember this
well,
right?
That's one of the stories, because you always get multiple versions of the story. So
okay.
that's one of it, you know. And another version says, you know, that basically every time Muhammad will come up with a verse that will cancel a command that came before it, the pagan Arabs will accuse him that you're just a forger, you know, you're just a false prophet. So, and basically Muhammad also was being caught every now and then forgetting certain things that he has revealed. So, in order, of course, to rescue himself, apparently his God jumped to the rescue by sending this verse to him, telling him that it's okay, it is God who causes people to forget certain verses. Now, does this sound really odd to you that the Prophet of Islam, who supposedly the role model, the standard for all Muslims to follow, and he should be the one who should retain it in his own memory as a perfect person?
Right. We have a problem here. I mean, the master record doesn't seem to work well.
Bill, we have a huge problem here.
Right.
If the person who revealed the Quran to me is forgetting some of it, how do I know now that what I have in my hand today is actually the full Quran? Now, just...
And it gets worse later. Do we have the whole Quran when we come to the compilation?
Exactly. But just to avoid anyone of accusing us that we're just making up story about this verse, let's go to the next slide. Here we have Aisha, who is one of Muhammad's favorite wives. She is the young girl whom Muhammad proposed to when she was 6 years old, and he married her when she was 9-year-old, and he was in his 50s at that time.
Right.
She is the second wife, basically, that he married, the only virgin wife, basically, that Muhammad married. This wife said this. She said, a man got up to pray in the morning, and that was in the early morning, basically, at dawn, and he read the Quran and raised his voice in reading, which is chanting it, and that's common, basically. In certain prayers, you can chant loudly, and others, you have to read it silently. And when the morning came, the apostle of Allah, meaning Muhammad, said, may Allah have mercy on so-and-so, like he is blessing him, basically. Last night, he reminded me a number of verses I was about to forget. What do you say about this, Bill?
Well, here we have the perfect man, the perfect Muslim, the perfect Arab with the perfect memory. So we're told, admitting that he's forgetting things. I mean, actually, Muhammad reminds me of myself, and I'm not perfect.
Yeah, that's a very honest, at least, assessment. We're all not perfect. We're all human. I mean, I'm not so sure if I can remember what I had for dinner last night. Nevertheless, to remember an entire book that is so crucial, basically, to be preserved. Now, if, let's say, historically we're told, you know, the Quran was written, this is our best and perfect understanding of what was revealed, I'm okay with that. But to always label it as a perfect, preserved, nothing is missing, this is a troubling challenge, basically, that commands you to go and critique what you are hearing.
Well, if it's absolutely and completely perfect, if we can find any one thing that is imperfect, then it's not perfect. So, I mean, they put forth a hypothesis which is simply they can't support.
Right. We're told also that right after the death of the Prophet in the year 632, and it was a sudden death, by the way. He fell ill, and there's a story that tells us that possibly an effect of a poison, basically, that was his food was poisoned by one of the ladies of a Jewish tribe, because he basically annihilated all of her family. So nevertheless, he fell ill. He died in the year 632 AD. Right after his death, there was what we call the apostate war. A lot of people left Islam, and the governor who came after Muhammad was Abu Bakr, Muhammad's closest friend. He is the first righteous or guided caliph, we call him. He's the father of Aisha, as a matter of fact. He only served in office, if I want to use this terminology, for 2 years and died after that. But during these 2 years, he was adamant about fighting those apostates and forcing them to come back to Islam. Now, the story goes that he feared, him and Omar, who is his successor, they feared that some of the people who memorized the Quran might die. Now, when we do an investigation, we mentioned this in our book, The Quran Dilemma, we find that only 2 of the scribes that were well known to memorize the Quran have died in these battles. So we're not talking about a huge number. So it's obviously that there is a psychological reason that both Omar and Abu Bakr realized that, you know, the Quran cannot be preserved much longer in memory. It's been already preserved in memory for over 23 years now. So they went ahead and they formed a committee and asked one of Muhammad's scribes basically to begin collection of verses. Now, let's assume indeed that the Quran was preserved and the Prophet has a copy of it. Why would you have to form a committee to go and seek everyone instead of going to a specific individual and say, please give me that copy?
But there's another part to the story. Not only were they afraid that the reciters, as they call them, would be killed, we already know there's stories about there are arguments, there are variations within the text.
That is true. However, this argument actually began to escalate at a later time, so the danger behind that argument will appear in the second recension of the Quran. And yes, I said it correctly, there was a first recension, which we will be addressing immediately after we take our short break.
Pressure slowly building. An explosion that shocked the world. A coastline forever changed. The oil impossible to remove. Nothing could destroy it until the source was found, until that source was sealed. To uncover the source of Islamic terror, read The Quran Dilemma, Islam Unplugged.
Hi, I'd like to welcome you back to our show, The Islamic Dilemma. In the first half of this show, we were discussing the collection of the Quran and the beginning of that process. And Bill, you were saying that basically there was some psychology involved here in terms of why the Quran, or the need actually rose to put it together, one of which was the fear to lose it from memory.
Right.
And that's basically what the research will show also, that that was one of the primary reasons why Omar and Abu Bakr basically put together this committee. Now, my argument was, if we have a copy of the Quran that Muhammad kept, because some will argue that he had a copy of it in his home, in a closet, then why didn't they go straight to that one? Wouldn't that be the perfect copy to just make other copies of?
One would think.
What they did actually is they appointed a person who then called upon everyone, notice everyone, not going to a specific individuals, and says, if you have basically any parts of the Quran, whether preserved in memory or a written form, bring it to us so we can put this Quran together. And that's what we call the first recension. After that process was done, basically, they ended up with one copy, one manuscript, I should say one codex, and they gave it to one of the wives of the Prophet. Her name is Hafsa, who happens to be, by the way, the daughter of Omar.
Right.
And that copy stayed with her. And you did allude to another problem, and the problem that Bill was talking about is there was some tension between different Muslims in terms of the different dialects in reading the Quran. And if you recall, we talked about the fact that Muhammad claimed that the Quran was revealed to him in 7 different letters, or dialects, if you wish, and that it is okay to read it in whichever easier for you. What happened actually is Abu Bakr died, then came Omar, then Omar died, then came a third governor, his name is Uthman, and Uthman by that time was already expanding the territory of the Islamic nation into the southern parts of Iraq all the way to Syria and so on and so forth. His military leaders, one of which at least was in that area, sent him an alarming message stating that some of my troops actually are having tension with each other because a group of them reads the Quran one way and another group reads the Quran